Welcome to the Truth Driven Ministries Podcast, where we talk about things like growth mindsets, healing, communication, identity, mission, and purpose. Are you feeling stuck? Don't worry. We'll be discussing practical ways to break through and level up your life. Let's get started. There we go. Hello, we're here.
Hi, we are. We are back again.
Yes. Today is Sunday, the 30th. Gosh, can you believe it's almost August?
It's almost here. It is. The weather keeps reminding us.
Yes, it does. Well, today we're going to continue the conversation about burden versus load. And today we are talking about whose load are you carrying?
Yep.
Do you ever find that, with a lot of what we do here, we talk to a lot of people. And when people feel overwhelmed, what they find out is they're carrying everybody else's load, not just theirs. Actually, they ignored theirs. They put theirs in the corner. Excuse me. And then they do what?
Don't pay attention to it at all.
No.
Take care of other people.
And they carry everybody else's load. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. I want to read again in Galatians 6. I'm going to read 1 through 5. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another, for each one shall bear his own load. And let me go ahead and read it in the Passion before we start talking about it. Okay. I love the way the Passion does it also. Again, Galatians 6, 1 through 5. My beloved friends, if you see a believer who is overtaken with a fault, may the one who overflows with the Spirit seek to restore him. Win him over with gentle words which will open his heart to you and will keep you from exalting yourself over him. Love empowers us to fulfill the law of the Anointed One as we carry each other's troubles. If you think you are too important to stoop down to help one another, you are living in deception. Let everyone be devoted to fulfill the work of God that God has given them to do with excellence. Say excellence.
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 It's important.
It is.
And their joy will be in doing what's right and being themselves and not being affirmed by others. Every believer is ultimately responsible for his or her own conscience. And I love the way that it puts it, because it's talking about this isn't just our physical needs. This is our emotional needs and our spiritual needs also. Mm-hmm. We have times in our life when our call and our purpose feels heavy and feels weighty, but we're to share burdens. We're to share the extra. We talked a little bit about this in our last podcast. We're to share the extra weight of things. When somebody stumbles, when somebody gets deceived, and different things like that, we're supposed to help lift our brothers up and carry their burdens with them. There's some circumstances that happen, like say if somebody loses a loved one, somebody is suffering because of the sins of other people. There's a lot of circumstances in which we have burdens and they're just too much, and we're supposed to help care as a Christians, help carry for one another. But at the same time, we also live in a world where everybody's irresponsible now. Everybody gets a little hangnail and is like, oh my gosh, you just, I'm dying. No, you're not. You're fine. It's a hangnail. And sometimes we get emotional hangnails, and there's reasons for this. I'm not putting anybody down or anything, but if you have an emotional hangnail and you feel like it's like something major, it's usually because you don't have a balance thinking about what is your load and what is other people's load. So I want to talk a little bit. I want us to go into that. So I made some notes here. To recap, we had a wonderful healing meeting.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about this. So I'm going to recap a little bit. Excuse me. I have a tickle in my throat all day. From the healing meeting, we talked about we have legitimate needs.
Yes.
Like, I have a legitimate need to be loved. You have a legitimate need to be loved, to be accepted for who we are. And sometimes in the process of growing up, we don't get those needs met and get those needs fulfilled. Now, this isn't about like what your parents did or didn't do. This is just, your parents can't be God to you. Only God can meet all your needs. And so sometimes in the course of growing up, it's not even so much what happened to you, it's how your perception of what happened. And so if you came away from growing up feeling like you were deeply loved, like you belonged, you were deeply accepted, then you're not going to have such a distortion of these needs. But if you came out of childhood for whatever reasons, I don't think there's any parent that grows, that looks at their child and says, wow, I want to fail my child. But we're all going to fail our children to some degree. I'm going to fail my children as much as I don't want to. I'm going to fail them in areas, and they're going to have to learn how to look inward and turn to God and to get some of those needs met. But our core needs, if you were a person that grew up and you just didn't feel special, you didn't feel loved, you didn't feel valued, and so you entered this world in a deficit, you have legitimate needs that I would say are starving. We kind of use the example of physical needs. We said if you didn't ever eat, like let's say you didn't eat for 3 days, I don't care how moral you are, and we put a buffet before you, you're probably going to, and we say don't eat from it, you're probably going to eat from it. Why? Because the screaming of your physical needs are going to overtake you, and that's just how that works. Now, our emotional needs work the same way. When I want to be loved and I have a love hunger, my standards go to the ground.
Yeah. You'll operate out of character.
You
out of
do.
your typical character.
Oftentimes, because what do you want? You just want to be loved. You just want to be cared for. You just want to be seen, and you just want to be heard. We all have that deep-seated need to be loved because our Father put it inside of us. And there's nothing wrong with a legitimate need to be loved, but it's kind of like that old song, we're going to look for love in all the wrong places when we're starving in those areas because we don't think straight. So a lot of what we're talking about today, when we talk about load and we talk about it getting out of balance, whether I'm giving up my load for somebody to carry for me, or whether a lot of what we're talking about today is going to be enabling. It's going to be about when I take somebody else's load and I try to carry that for them, thinking that I'm helping them. And it is not help. But why do I do that? There's several reasons why I do that. But before I get too much into that, let me look over my notes to make sure I said everything I wanted to going into it. Okay. When those needs get out of balance, when our need to be loved, when our need to be cared for, we talked about it Wednesday night, it's either I'm going to get my needs met in an unhealthy way through taking, which I would say is giving up responsibility of my life, or giving. And giving is when I give to somebody else to take their load. And one way looks irresponsible and the other way looks over-responsible, but it's the same thing. It's still, both ways are two forms of taking. It's just going to take on a different appearance. And I want that to wash over you for a minute. Because a lot of times when we are enablers, we think that we're being Mother Teresa to somebody. And what we're doing is we are stealing an opportunity for that person to grow. We are stealing their load that they are supposed to carry. Because why? You are not anointed to carry their load. When we talk about the load, that is the responsibilities that God has given me along with my call and my purpose and my mission. And I am tasked to do certain things in the kingdom, not somebody else. Everybody has their own load in the kingdom to carry, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And it can look so different, but each one is so important.
Very important. You don't want to overgive because then it's not out of actually helping, like you were saying.
Yeah, and it's not even, we call it giving.
Right.
But it's not truly giving.
And who are we doing it for? We're doing it for ourselves.
Yes.
We want to be the hero. We want to be we
want to feel good.
Yeah.
Because when you feel unloved, like love is so critical. So we're either, like I said, to get those out of balance, you know, there can be balanced needs and out of balance needs. What we're talking about today is out of balance needs. So if I have a love hunger, I'm either going to take it from people or I'm going to give, which is enabling to get to be somebody's hero because it feels good when you're somebody's hero, right?
Yeah. You get to be the savior. They need me. I'm important in their life and they can't do life without me. And it kind of gives you a feeling of they're never,
Love.
they can't leave. And
Yeah.
like, oh, we're so connected. We have a connection.
And
when-
it's a false sense because it's not real. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, I really want to dial into enabling because I would say it is just an epidemic that we have because it goes like this. You have the irresponsible one who's giving up their responsibility and you have the over-responsible one and like it just locks in like that. And so usually you have this relationship that seems very beneficial, but it is actually very toxic and hurtful for both parties. I was made to carry my own load. You're made to carry your own load. You are made to carry your own load. And if you're carrying your load, then that's fantastic and you will flourish. But if you are carrying somebody else's load, then you are robbing yourself and you are robbing them of an opportunity to grow.
yeah.
And that's a lot of times what I think we don't see. And we do it under the guise of being a Christian and helping. What do we call it? Your family. I love, her family has something very cute that they call it.
Well, we call it hipping. I don't need your hip. And we
Because
use
it's
it
not
in,
help. It's
It is-
missing.
it is not help when you are hipping.
No, it is not.
In my family, if somebody kind of oversteps or, says like, "Oh, let me show you the way," I don't need your hip. You're making this harder on me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also one of the places that it shows up most is when we're parents. It shows up in our personal relationships, but it also shows up as parents. When you enable a child, that child never grows up. Why are we having an epidemic of narcissism right now? And not clinical, but pop psychology narcissism, because we have a generation of us doing everything for our kids and our kids just becoming flabbergasted, just like, oh my gosh, what do you mean you're asking me to do something? Because we've not asked them to do anything. We've taught everybody gets a trophy. No, everybody does not get a trophy. Sometimes there's a winner and sometimes there's a loser, and each one is okay. Like we're teaching a whole society about performance when what Jesus did on the cross is not about performance.
No.
What Jesus did on the cross to have, so that we can be in relationship with God was a free gift. And now we teach our kids and we teach everybody, it's all about what you do and perform. If you do this right and you do it well enough, then everybody will love and admire you. And if you don't, then you're a loser. And we bought into it so bad that we don't want anybody to feel bad. So everybody gets a trophy. So if you don't try, guess what you get? You get a trophy.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings by nobody getting a trophy, but there's just a realistic point of view that we have to come back to. We have swung too far one way, and we are making just a terrible mistake by enabling so much. Enabling is when you do something for somebody that they can do for themselves, kind of like we're talking about right now. If I'm supposed to carry my load, if you enable me to not carry my load, then here, okay, take it. Most of us will get in the habit or the pattern of, sure, because we've in our society today have gotten to the point where what are we doing? If somebody cares about me, they'll help carry my load, not my burden. We're not even talking about burdens anymore. We're talking about load. So there becomes this toxicness where I love to be enabled and people love to enable me. And so like that, we're talking about that relationship there. For a lot of our clients that we have come in for counseling, what happens? This is huge.
Well, there's always a giver and there's always a enabler and a taker, or a giver and a taker, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
And they both have their difficulties in working with, but
yes.
it's almost like even if you get a taker to have a glimpse of, oh, maybe that's my responsibility, the giver won't let them.
They won't.
They can't, they need them, because if the taker says, I don't need you to enable me anymore, which I know that's a stretch, but
That is
if
a stretch.
that happens,
But it does sometimes.
a giver loses their job.
They do.
And then they don't know their role, they don't know their identity, and they have to go find another taker, but then it's the taker's fault.
Yes. And the enabler a lot of times will develop, both of them have really what I would call a victim mentality. But a lot of times what ends up happening is the enabler's like, I have to do this. If I don't do this, then who will do this? Like they really do
Yes.
have that exaggerated sense of over responsibility. And we're not putting down the taker and we're not putting
No.
down the giver. Just if you are able to identify the toxic cycles that you're in and realize that it really is it's not just like a psychology thing. This is a violation of biblical principle. And when we violate biblical principles, we're going to have
It's messy.
It will be messy and we'll have a lot of problems from that. So when we begin to think about, okay, how toxic is enabling? And actually, let's talk about for a minute, why do we carry other people's loads? We kind of talked a little bit about, the setup for it. If I get my worth, if I get my value from that, if I learn early on, how do I receive love? The taker says, I just take love. I just let people do things and I take and I take and I take. But the enabler says, wow, if I become important to this person, then they can't leave me. Therefore, I'm never rejected and I'm always loved. So they will place themselves in somebody's life as they will cripple the person so they can't get rid of them, kind of like you're talking about, where they have to keep their job. So if I am an enabler and you are a taker, I have to keep you handicapped because why?
Well, if I change or I don't need you anymore, then what are you going to do?
What am I
What
gonna
is
do?
our relationship?
Nothing. If that's what it's based on.
Right.
If we're like walking together in community, then that's great. But if our relationship is based on you're a loser and I'm a hero, and every time you screw up, I'm going to jump in and save you and help you, I feel good, you feel bad.
And our dynamic can stay
Yeah.
in that imbalance.
Imbalanced. And that's what makes it so toxic. Now, people will say all the time when they come in, what's wrong with helping somebody? Nothing wrong with helping somebody. Helping somebody, truly helping somebody, and enabling somebody, completely different.
Yes. Hard to
So-
see the difference, I think, when you're
When
in
you have
that,
enabling lenses
and
on
you're
your
in
eyes.
that cycle at the time.
Because it really
I'm sorry.
does. No, it really does feel like they're helping. They're helping.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you. Because why? Because that's the only way they know to get love. Just like the taker. The taker only knows just to take it. So you really have to go through a season in your life where you're like, okay, I'm going to stop this behavior. But during that time when you stop that behavior, you will feel no love. Because how do I measure anything anymore? And just to go back for just a second, why do we carry other people's loads? Why do we enable? We think it's a noble thing sometimes, but one, we do it to avoid our own load. Man, it is easier to solve somebody else's problems than it is to solve my problems. If I'm out of balance with it, then that way, if I feel overwhelmed or I feel stressed, I'm not going to think about my stuff. I'm going to think about your stuff. And it's easier for enablers to see a mess in somebody else's life for them to see a mess in their life. Because remember, they get their worth and their esteem from being the good person, the hero, the savior. And it really doesn't work like that. Why do they enable? They want to make them like us. Like they want you to like them. So how do they get you to like them? By developing a dependency. And I think people don't like to see that about enabling.
Yeah.
If you are an enabler, you are teaching people to be dependent on you in a very unhealthy way instead of being dependent on the Lord. Like a lot of times, and we see this in counseling all the time, not our counseling, but what we will hear of cases, and we will see people. If I needed people's approval, what better career than ministers than a giving profession, so I can make people come to me? But we don't want to do that. What do we want to do? We want to teach them to stand on their own. We want to teach them to look to the Lord. But if we needed to be the hero in somebody's life, what would we be teaching them?
To depend on us.
Yeah.
To come to us, to, we'll carry everything that you've got going, and we'll give you all the answers, and
we would help nobody.
Right.
Nobody would be helped by that because everybody needs to learn how to carry their own load.
yeah, we want to empower people, not give
take
them
away.
crutches.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. And a lot of times too, our identity has just become what we can do for people versus who we really are. If you're an enabler and you've done it for so long, it's just like it's second nature. You don't even think about it anymore. You're just constantly just doing for other people. Why? Because you have distorted your sense of what you're responsible for. That's why we love talking about boundaries. Jesus knew boundaries. He divided people into different sections, and he had different relationships with different people. He had his disciples, but yet he had his inner circle, yet he had the masses. He interacted with people very differently. He got exactly what we're talking about because this is a biblical principle. I have to know what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for. So when we begin to think about those things, it can get really fuzzy. Like, how do I know what is my load, and how do I know what is your load? And how do I know if I'm just being nice and I just see you struggling and I want to help you with that? Well, we have to begin to ask ourselves some questions. Is this something that they can and should do for themselves? You ever seen a mom or dad do a project for a child?
Yes.
Why? Because it's tricky, because the mom or dad will say, well, I don't want them to fail. I don't want them to get a bad grade. Well, if they didn't put the effort in, then they should get a bad grade because maybe they'll learn something from that. But usually what happens is the mom or dad feels like a failed grade of their child will be a reflection on them. So it's not really, why do parents do it? It's not for the child. It is for the parent. I feel like a bad parent if my child gets a bad grade. Therefore, it's a reflection on me, and I don't want it to reflect on me. So come on, kiddo, let's get the poster board, and I'll do that project for you.
Yep.
And
Not pretty.
It's not pretty. And so when we look at enabling, it looks nice. It looks like we're helping, but it's so deceptive.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to cover this, but one thing that I've heard you say many times is, and I may say this wrong, but if you solve the problem, then you get the lesson.
Yes.
You get the wisdom.
Yes.
Okay. It's something like if you do the lesson, then you get the wisdom.
Yeah. If I have the lesson and the lesson is mine, I get the wisdom from it. We want our children to learn. We want to allow people that we love to learn. It's not bad if somebody has to, I hate to say learn a lesson. Like, I don't mean it as punishment. I mean that if I want the wisdom, I need to go through the process of gaining the wisdom, or else it's not relevant to me.
Yeah. I think that's a very powerful concept.
So we don't want to steal somebody's lesson. If somebody's learning, even in relationships, I would say, there's different ways to enable in relationships. Let's say you have a husband and wife, and the husband says, I don't want to say this to the wife because it might make the wife mad. So the husband begins to control what information is said and what information isn't, because they don't want to fight. They don't want to pick a fight. They don't want to upset. That's a form of enabling. Why? Because you're taking away somebody's choice for them. in, and then putting it in the context of I'm helping us not fight. No, you're taking away somebody's choice. And I think it's hard to see enabling like that. There's all the time. You just even look at addiction. The statistics for when people get clean or sober in relationships, the relationship usually busts up. Why? Not because of the addiction itself, but because of the co-addictions around it, like the enabling. Because if I need to be somebody's hero and somebody no longer needs me to be their hero, then we have to redefine our roles. And that goes with like any type of addiction. And I'd say addiction is any behavior that's out of balance. So it could be shopping. It could be like if I'm just irresponsible, if I want somebody to caretake me, then if one of the person in the relationship shifts, it is going to cause massive problems because both people will have to recalculate who the heck they are in the relationship and what is my load and what is your load. And when you renegotiate those types of like loads that you have, if we have a friendship where I do all the work and you get all the benefits, or you do all the work and I get all the benefits, like there's always one person that's getting screwed. Like, or you know what I mean? There's one person when they change their mindset is getting an upgrade and one person is getting a downgrade. So that does cause tension in relationships.
Yeah, people don't like it.
They do not.
They want to keep doing the same thing.
When something is out of balance, like you get used to being the top or the bottom, right? But when it balances out, both people feel uncomfortable. But yet again, like I said, one person is getting a downgrade while one person is getting an upgrade. So it feels hard.
Yeah.
So a little bit what I want to talk to you about. If you're coming in on this and you don't know who we are, you haven't watched this before, I'm Angie Lynch.
And I'm Christina Crane.
And we are with Truth Driven Ministries. And a lot of what we do here is we do counseling, coaching, we have meetings, we have workshops, we have retreats. We do a lot of amazing things. We're a hospital for the hurting and a training ground for spiritual warriors. So I encourage you to check out our website, www.thetruthDrivenLife.org, or contact us in any way if you have any questions. So just putting that out there before we move into some points to ponder. I want you to think about giving and helping out of a wound need isn't truly giving. Giving is about giving without motive, without an agenda. But if I give out of a distorted need, out of a love hunger need, then what begins to happen?
I'm enabling.
And that's not enabling is not giving.
No,
It is not.
It's like holding them down. I love the example that you used about, think about your baby when they started walking.
Yeah.
If you were like sad about your baby starting to walk,
Moving
and you
from
were like,
baby stage to toddler stage.
yeah, and you're like, I don't want them to grow up yet. I want them to stay in this stage longer. And you kept pushing them over. We would all be like, oh my gosh.
That's horrible.
Yeah, we're like, I'll learn to walk for you. Okay, so you don't have to. It's going to be too
I'll
hard
carry
for
you. You don't need to learn to walk. I'll carry you.
Right. We would all be horrified.
We would. And that
But-
would be very obvious. But when we emotionally enable, when we spiritually enable, when we mentally enable, we just
We do the same thing.
we do, but it doesn't. We don't register it like that.
Yeah.
But once you begin to work on this area in your life, and if you're an enabler or if you're a taker, this is not your lot in life. This
Amen.
isn't who you are. This is just what you're doing. You've learned to do this to get a legitimate need met that has just gotten out of control in your life. So this doesn't define who you are. So I don't want anybody to pick up any shame or guilt or just condemnation on yourself. Just look at it and say, this is working in my life or it's not. And if you are enabling, you will have no energy to live your life. And it's like I said, usually people who choose the giver, the faux giver side of it, they love people and they want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's a genuine
it is.
like desire. Would you say a lot of this is subconscious in the beginning until you start to see the behaviors?
It is, because on our blueprint, you're just on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to begin to recognize, for one, when you begin to enable and what enabling
Mm-hmm.
is, because you've gotten your needs met for so long and your warm fuzzies off of enabling people, that it's going to be hard to see initially,
Mm-hmm.
because it'll just feel like this is my responsibility. Like the world is somehow going to end if you don't do X, Y, Z. No. At first, you've got to begin to look at people and say, is that my responsibility or is that their responsibility? Even just like with feelings, like you're not responsible for whether I'm happy or sad, and I'm not responsible for whether you're happy or sad. Do I care? Yes. Do you care? Yes. But ultimately, I'm not responsible. If I share truth with you and you get upset, I didn't upset you. Truth upset you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's hard in communication and relationships, is a lot of times people, that'll be a way that they enable. They enable by not telling the truth. They learn that, oh, I don't want to upset this person. I don't want to make this person mad. If you're making a lot of statements like that, chances are
You're enabling.
you're an enabler.
Mhm.
And so begin to listen to the language that you have. Begin to look at circumstances and you're like, how did I end up with this responsibility? If you're up late at night and doing your child's homework, that's not your homework. You graduated,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
In a relationship, if you are discerning or taking on the idea of, should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I do, like, a lot of times if you're going back and forth, you don't have a real clearly defined idea of who you are and who the other person is. But that's okay, because you can get that.
That's awesome.
So another point I want to make, and we talked a little bit about this on Wednesday at the healing meeting, is emotional entitlement.
That word is it's a big word.
Entitlement,
Yeah.
yes. A lot of times what happens is when a need gets out of control in my life, I begin to feel entitled. And enablers are huge with this. Like, if I'm nice to you,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not just being nice to you. I'm feeling emotionally entitled because you owe me something if I'm nice to you.
I don't owe you anything.
If we don't understand, then
That's how givers think.
that's how they think.
Mhm.
And we don't mean to, but faux givers will enablers will begin to do what? They will begin to get bitter and resentful because they're doing all this giving and nobody is treating them right. Nobody is appreciating. Nobody is doing. If I am having a meltdown about how unappreciated that I feel, chances are I am feeling emotionally entitled. Because if I'm just nice to somebody, then I'm just doing that to be nice. But if I do it with an expectation back, there goes that emotional entitlement. And when you have an enabling mindset, that just grows and we get real bitter. I think I gave the example on Wednesday about, like, you'll begin to see it in the small things. If you'll pray to the Holy Spirit and say, Holy Spirit, show me where I'm getting emotionally entitled, He will show you.
Oh, yeah.
I can remember being in a grocery store, and you know how you almost bump into somebody and really they're bumping into you, but you're like, oh, I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
And I had that experience, and instead of saying, oh, no, I'm sorry, it's me too, like, hey, they just kind of grumped and went on, and it just made me so mad. And I remember saying to myself, wow, I am being codependent on their response. I am saying I'm sorry, but what I'm truly doing is I want them to say that back to me.
Yeah.
Like, if you apologize to somebody and you expect, you do it as a way to get them to say it back to you, that's not a true apology, is it?
Not really.
And so a lot of times, if you'll begin to look for it, if you are enabling, you will have a lot of emotional entitlement.
I think you can, when you talk about the example of if you're physically hungry, I know I'm going like way back.
It's okay.
But you're talking about if you're physically hungry, you'll steal right, from the buffet that you were
Yeah.
told not to, which is might be out of your character.
Absolutely.
So if we look at that in an emotional sense, so let's say you're hungry and you steal, and then you get like arrested for stealing,
Yeah.
and you're like, I was hungry, I had to steal. So you're entitled
Emotion-
in that
entitled.
way. So if
Because
you're
what they will tell
emotionally-
you is they'll say, there's free food programs, there's blah, blah, blah. Like we get this mindset of, I deserve this.
yeah, someone owes this to me, and we can do that emotionally
Yes.
in the giving area,
Yeah.
where we say they should be happy, they should be satisfied. I do all this for them, and
If you find yourself like melting down over how much you do for other people and they don't do something for you, you are in trouble because you're not giving. What are
Right.
you doing? You're a lot of the times we carry somebody's load and they didn't even ask us to. So we're carrying their load, and not only are we carrying their load, we're building unforgiveness, bitterness, resentment. Because why? Because they're supposed to somehow be indebted to us because we carried their load for them, and that's how we get our worth, and that's how we get our value. But that's just so out of balance, and that's not giving.
that's where that victim mentality comes in with a giver.
Yes, I know, the faux giving,
faux
the
giver.
the
Yeah.
enabling. Yeah. What are you expecting back? Begin to listen to your language when you do give to people and see what it is. Have you ever given a gift to somebody and then they got rid of it or they did something with it? If you give somebody a gift, you gave it to them. It no longer belongs to you. Ownership transferred. But we've all kind of, got
Had that
hurt a little bit.
expectation. Yeah, for sure.
And so if you will begin to see these little examples in your life, of course, that's a little example, but it begins to see a pattern. You begin to see a pattern in how you think about things. And we really, truly, just like what Jesus did on the cross for us was a free gift. It is hard to do a free gift because we can't even understand it. We think, okay, I'm forgiven of my sins, past, present, and future. But then I have to be sorry, but then I have to be this, but then I have to grovel, but then I have to beg. It's like a little bit of Jesus's blood and a whole bunch of my flesh. And that's not how that works. It's hard for us to understand what a free gift is. And so we have to work, we have to work at it. Another point I wanted to make, we've kind of gone over this one, and it kind of goes into my other one, enabling stunts other people's growth. I want you to hear that. If you hear nothing else, just understand, let your takeaway be that enabling hurts everybody. It's not giving. It's not helping. It is a way for you to get your need met and ingratiate yourself to other people and them to yourself, but it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't fix your wound. Because one of my points here, I'm going to skip forward and come back to this. Because it hits this, you will never feel secure. If you are doing something transactional, you will never feel secure in that relationship because there's always that place in the back of your head that says they're only friends with me or they only love me or the only reason they're doing this is because of XYZ. If you're thinking transactional, you'll only see transactional. So you won't ever feel secure at all in a relationship. You won't believe that they're there for you. You'll believe they're there for what you do for them. And honestly, if you're an enabler, I would say about 85% of people in your life right now are there for the stuff that you do for them. Because what happens? How do you fix enabling? You begin to stop it. And as you begin to stop it, you will see people flock to you.
They will drop like flies.
They will drop like flies. But the neat thing is that 15% that stay there, they stay there because they're there for you.
Yeah.
Versus what you'll do for them. But if your identity is based on what you do for other people, it's going to be really hard for you to cut that cord. But you will be surrounded by people who will use you. And it hurts.
It does.
But
It does
if
hurt.
you volunteer to put yourself in that place, people will take advantage of you. And so you've got to get to the point where you say, no, I want people to see me. I want people to know me. Because remember, the original problem with this is I feel so unloved. Enabling will never make you feel loved. Enabling will only just kind of highlight how precarious that love is, that solution for that is, because they're not going to stay. The transactional people in your life aren't going to stay when you quit transacting with them.
That's true. It's hard, but it's true.
It is.
And
But-
I will say, once you get past that initial
Yes.
shock of how many people drop away,
Like flies.
you do see a difference in your relationships.
And the quality.
yes.
And how are you ever going to be seen and heard and truly cared for and loved if you're just a need for somebody versus them really looking at you and saying, Christina, I just love being your friend. I just love being around you, not for what you can do for me, but because of who you are. You bring joy to my life. I enjoy our friendship. Because why? Because of who she is, because of who I am, not because of what we can do for each other. Big, 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 big difference.
And when you give in those relationships, which people tend to not do initially.
Oh, I know, because-
givers are like, I got me, I'm taking care of other people. And you're like a giver and you're like, I'm taking care of other people. So we can't take
It's
care of
weird.
each other.
It's two givers. It's weird together.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when you do experience those relationships,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of shocked
Yes.
at the difference in the feel of it.
It is, because it is weird to get you, if you're, let me back up for a second. If you're transactional and you're trying to move to non-transactional, it feels very weird, because most people don't know how to interact without transaction. And when I say transactional, that means I do this, you do this, then you do this, then I do this. And it's kind of like that keeping score kind of thing versus just, let's just love each other. Let's just be there for each other. Let's just both jump in at the same time. And it's just very, very, very different. Now, my last point, kind of back to, I started with this, is I want to say that enabling is one of the most destructive and deceptive vices that you can have. A lot of people tend to look at it like, oh, enabling is okay. Enabling, I'm helping people. I just pray that you would just take that before the Lord. And if you are enabling anybody in your life, you are stealing from one, your life, and stealing from two, their life, because that is not help. If you carry somebody's load that the Lord has commanded them to carry and to be responsible for, if you are interfering with that, if you are blocking that, you are breaking spiritual principles. And it's not like the Lord is going to be mad at you or he's not going to love you. But when we break spiritual principles, there are effects. There are consequences from it, just in the natural. How am I going to have, an example of that might be, how can I connect with people? I can't connect with you if I won't allow you to be an equal to me. I can't, how could we partner together if we are not equals? If I am up here and you are down here and I have to help you because you can't, I view that you can't do things for yourself, that's not a good dynamic to have in any type of relationship. Even, I'll say, one of the hardest things I think with kids, as we're teaching them to not need us. I have two boys. My husband and I tried the best we could to teach them to not need us, to look to God, depend, you and God will have a relationship, and a spouse will come alongside you. You will no longer need us. If you truly love somebody, you will, like in parenting, if you love your kids and you want them to grow, you will teach them to not need you.
And does that mean that you just abandoned your children and did nothing for them? And when they're hurting, you were just like, figure it out yourself?
Not at all. Not at all. And what's really neat is it can usher in, if I have to have a relationship with somebody, then it comes like at a cost. And the cost is then it takes away choice. And the beautiful thing about not being in that toxic transactional relationship is then I can choose. I don't have to have you in my life. I want to have you in my life. And that is a relationship upgrade all the way around. I want my children to want to be in my life. I don't want them to feel indebted. I don't want them to feel like they have to, out of guilt, out of, I see a lot of, we're just using children as an example, but I see a lot of parents really, well, I birthed you. I did this. I did that. No, I don't want to have to guilt anybody to be in a relationship. I want somebody to want to be in a relationship with me.
Yeah.
But if we're teaching and enabling, it just gets toxic.
Yeah. It really is an extremely destructive cycle to be in. And if you see this, it'll unlock a key in relationships for you if you're willing to look at this and willing to see where you're taking an active role in enabling somebody else.
It really is a relationship upgrade, because if you are enabling somebody, they're there in your mind because they have to be, but you want people in your life. When somebody's there because they want to be. And that's where true connection really begins to come from. So I want y'all to think about this. I think we actually have another podcast that we are going to talk about a little bit more different things. We're going to take it on what happens when, not when I enable, but when I allow people to enable me, when I give up all responsibility in my life, because we need to hit both sides of it.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to pray us out. Christina is going to, we don't have a camera.
Turn us off.
She's going to do her can't even talk today, 5,000th job today, and she's going to turn us off. But we're going to pray. Dear Lord, I just thank you so much, Lord. I thank you, Lord, that you would come in and you would show us the value of just encouraging people to carry their own load as we carry our load. Lord, I would thank you, Lord, that you would begin of us discernment to tell the difference between what is a burden and what is a load, Lord, that we would be just incredible lifter-uppers of people in the kingdom, Lord, that we would not cripple anybody at all, Lord, that we would just encourage them, Lord, that we would empower them. Lord, I thank you for the difference, for understanding the difference between the two. And I thank you for your courage and your wisdom that you will I just declare it over everybody listening. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.